Hi, this is Mr. Bledsoe, and in this video we're going to take some points in the coordinate plane and we're going to reflect them across some lines. Now, we've already done something very similar to this when we plotted numbers and their opposites on number lines. So here's a number line with the numbers 6 and -6 plotted on it. And if I fold this number line in half over this line right here at 0, then I can see that the two numbers are going to be the same distance from 0. This red line here is the same length as this green line here. So one way of thinking about this is to imagine that there's a mirror right here on this dotted line, so that the number 6 and the number -6 are reflections across this line. And it turns out you can reflect any point across any line by doing the same folding technique. So for example, if I had a point on this piece of paper, let me just put a point right here. And if I drew a line on this piece of paper right here, then I can reflect this point across this line like this. I just take my paper and I fold it across my line. And I can see that my point, I can see it through the paper, and if I mark this point right here, if I mark it on the other side of my paper, then when I unfold my paper, this line, or excuse me, this point is a reflection of this point across this line. This line is called the line of reflection. Well, let's use the same idea of reflections across a line to look at reflections of points in the coordinate plane. So I want to plot the point -6, 4 on this coordinate plane. So -6, 3, 4. So here's the point -6, 4. And if I want to reflect this point over the y-axis, remember the y-axis is just a line. So if I reflect this point over the y-axis, I'm going to do what I did before, which is I'm just going to fold my paper in half over this line. So fold it over my y-axis. And I can see when I fold my paper over that line, the y-axis, I can see that my point, it shows up through the paper right here. So I put a dot right here on the other side of my paper, and when I open my paper back up, I can see my reflected point is at the coordinates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. So my reflected point is at the coordinates 6, 4. So just like when I reflected the number -6 across the line at 0, I can see that my reflected point is going to be the same distance away from my line of reflection as my original point was. My distances here are the same. Now, you may have noticed that when we reflected the point -6, 4 across the y-axis, that the y-coordinate of the reflected point stayed the same. It's the same as the y-coordinate of the original point. Well, what do you think might happen if we took this same starting point, -6, 4, and reflected it across the x-axis? Well, pause the video right here, and I want you to reflect this point across the x-axis and see what the coordinates of the new point will be. Okay, so here's my point, -6, 4, and if I reflect this point over the x-axis, then that means I'm going to want to fold my paper across my x-axis. Now my x-axis becomes my line of reflection, and this point I can see on the other side of my paper right here. So I want to take my marker, make that point right there. And now my reflected point is right here, and the coordinates of my reflected point are 3, 4, 5, -6, and 1, 2, 3, -4. So when I reflected this point across the x-axis, I see my x coordinate stayed the same and my y coordinate changed to its opposite.